Hey y'all, I'm Sarah and welcome back to Thrills and Kills Booktube, where we read and discuss horror, thriller, and true crime. So if it's dark and spooky, I'm going to read it or watch it. So today I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, the worst books that I read in 2023. Now, thankfully, there were that many. I think there's only 5 books that I really disliked this year. The majority of my books were like a 3.5 star or higher. So I will do a separate video with the books that I liked the most, which will be probably way more than 5. Honestly, if I could whittle it down to 10, I would be surprised. But let's start with this one and then we can end the year on a positive note. So as always, just because I dislike something doesn't mean that it necessarily was a bad book. So what's that saying, right, about opinions? Everyone has one. So please don't get offended if your favorite book is on this list. It is what it is. Everyone has different reading styles and tastes and what they like and don't like. So, all right, let's get into it. The first book, this one, I've actually done a video previously. I'll link it up here and down below. And it was called I Hated It, where actually I discussed 2 of these books. But this first one, I've seen it all over YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, anywhere where horror books are discussed. People have been recommending this book, especially because this author just came out with a new book. So this is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I was so excited to get to this. I listened to the audiobook while we were on vacation out in Kentucky earlier this year, and I just went into it with such high hopes, and I hated it. Like almost from the beginning, I hated it. I couldn't understand what was happening. I just felt like it was so weird, weirder than it needed to be. I hated the boyfriend character and the discussions that they were having in the car with each other. I just got vibes like, if you've ever had like a terrible boyfriend who likes to mansplain everything and they think that they know better than you and they're constantly having to show off how smart they are and like how lucky you are to have them, but really they're just like mediocre white bread. That's the vibes I was getting from the boyfriend. I really disliked that character. The conversations they were having were just so dumb. I was like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. Like, you're reminding me of a college boyfriend I had who was completely terrible and, like I said, mediocre and went nowhere with life. I don't want to sit here and listen to your opinions. So again, that's what I'm saying. This is why I didn't like the book. Obviously, I'm biased and I was transferring some of my personal experiences and relationships onto this character, but nonetheless, I didn't like it. Yeah. And I felt like there was really only 2 scary scenes. There was a scene with like the pig when they were at the family farm, and then the very end when they're in the school. I was kind of getting like Michael Myers vibes, especially because he was talking about like the heavy boots like on the ground. And I was like, okay, that's like I'm conjuring like a scene from one of the Halloween movies in my mind. But I don't really understand why everyone said it was so scary. It really wasn't. It was just weird and WTF the entire way, and I didn't like it. Next up, we've got Wylding Hall by Elizabeth Hand. Also, I was super excited to get into this. So this is on Kindle Unlimited. It's pretty short. It's like slightly over 200 pages, I think. I got it on Kindle Unlimited. So you're following a band, and it's 1970s, and they're kind of like bohemian folk rock. Think about like a Fleetwood Mac, or if you know who Greta Van Fleet is. It's that kind of a band. And they are holed up in an old manor house in the country in England because they are set to record their newest album. They're isolated. This is the 70s, so like there's no cell phones, there's no internet. Their manager comes and checks on them every so often and brings them new food, and they're pretty broke. There's really no town to speak of. Things start going really weird. It's kind of like folk horror, kind of a haunted house book. It doesn't quite fit neatly into one category. Every chapter is narrated by someone else. So you've got, 6 members of the band. So they all give a point of view. And then there's like tangential characters like ex-girlfriends, current girlfriends, the manager, people who live in town. They're all taking a turn narrating, which is a lot of people to keep up with. And the right author or the right story, that could be great. That could really be a distinguisher to set a book like aside and make it like above and beyond a whole bunch of other books. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it just fell flat. Unless I read the title at the top of each chapter, it felt like it was one point of view the whole way through. I really didn't feel like I was getting any distinct voice, that I was reading from multiple different characters. It just felt like one person's stream of consciousness the entire way through the book. So I didn't like that. So then the characters were pretty flat. I just feel like there wasn't really any arc or much dimension to them. Again, it's a short book, so maybe if it had less characters or less narrators, that wouldn't have happened. It didn't really feel like horror. There were some scenes that were a little bit like ooky spooky, but nothing was scary. There were some weird scenes with like some dead birds, but whatever. And even though it was such a short book, about halfway through, I was like, is this thing done already? Like, I'm so done. I'm just so done reading about this. Oh, and the other thing I didn't like was, if you read the description and from page 1, you can tell somebody is dead. So that's a common trope where it starts off where someone's dead and then you're going to go back in time and kind of learn about what led up to the events, and then you're probably going to flip forward and learn about the investigation, but it just wasn't handled well. It didn't work in this book. It didn't work. So yeah, I didn't like it. Sorry. Okay, the next book that I really didn't like, and this was a new release. I was so excited for this. I was one of the first people to get a copy out of my library, but I was so disappointed. And this is Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. Now, I've never read any of his books before, so I didn't really know what his writing style was. I didn't really have much to go off of. I know this has actually been some people's one of their favorite books of the year, so again, I'm really sorry if you really like this book and I didn't. The premise was so neat. It takes place in Richmond, so I was really hoping to like it. But anyway, so we are following a group of young adult, like slightly out of college age kids. So there's one person in the group who is battling addiction, and unfortunately they wind up dead, and then the other circle of friends, they are trying to find out what happened to him. Well, apparently there is this new drug called Ghost, where if you take it, you can see ghosts, and they kind of say like, let's get haunted. That's kind of the tagline. And they're able to communicate with the dead. And so there are the people who are actually addicted and pass from addiction, but then on the flip side, the people who are still living, they become addicted to the ability to try to reach out to them. But it seems like the more they take, the fewer and fewer success they have with actually being able to contact their loved ones on the other side. Sounds like it's a really neat premise, right? Yeah, I agree. There was just multiple reasons I didn't like it. I just don't think I like his writing style. It felt like he found a few words to use and he just kept repeating them over and over. Like, I kid you not, in the span of one page, like front to back, he used liminal at least 2 times. And I'm like, let's think of another word. Like, I probably wouldn't, but I'm not an author. You're an author, maybe think of some different words. And then there was just this really weird thing where he kept at least 3 times, maybe 4 times in this book, he would say like, I'm coming for that coochie, 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 coo, coochie, coochie. I did a whole video review of this book, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but it just seemed like that's not how women think about their genitalia. Why? It just seemed like a weird way to write it. Like, don't write about a woman and her thought process in this very infantile, like toddler-like speaking manner. Like, let's not, if you can't do it right, then just don't write about women. Just make a male point of view, a male narrator. It really ticked me off. And I wanted to know more about like the ghosts and their backstory. It sort of felt like there was maybe like 3 different subplots happening, but then they kind of like went by the wayside, like just dissipated, and it never really felt like he tied them all together well, or he really explored all of them as fully as he could. So that's all I'm going to say. Again, you can go watch the video if you want to learn more. All right, next up, my last 2 books. I also have a video. I did a reading vlog at the end of October where I picked books that had to do with like October harvest folklore. 2 of the books that I read for that vlog I really disliked. So first up, we've got Thomas Tryon's Harvest Home. So I know this was written in the 70s, so some of this, my opinion, is definitely skewed by like a 2022 viewpoint rather than like a 1970s viewpoint, but regardless, I didn't like it. The book doesn't stand up to the test of time, in my opinion. So we're following this family and they leave New York City to escape to the countryside. I think it's actually, is it Connecticut or like Hudson Valley? I forget, but they escape a few hours outside of New York City and they buy a house in this small town. But the people there are just very odd. They don't really embrace modern technology. It's a very agricultural society. It's a very slowed down society, which is what attracted people to it. It's a nice place to raise children. It's like a slow and quiet life, but they seem to just be very stuck in their ways. And anytime someone in the town goes against their patterns, their traditions, their way of doing things, they can sort of be ostracized. The reasons I didn't like it was Thomas Tryon either doesn't know how to write about women, well, now he's passed, or he just really hated women, because there was multiple times in the book, which is going to be a spoiler, but whatever, the book came out in the 70s, multiple times in the book, where the main character, the husband, is cheating on his wife or just being a complete dickbag to his wife, and then blames that on her and her behavior. And it's like, oh, well, obviously you're upset. Well, yeah, you freaking cheated on your wife. She has a right to be upset. And he's like poking fun at the fact that she's upset and turning around and making it her fault and blaming it on her. And it was like, what in the freaking world? Or he was like just blaming it on like, oh, like her time of the month, or like female emotions, and like they don't know how to control themselves, that kind of a thing. And oh my God, it really pissed me off. All right, and then the last book that I really didn't like this year, I also read it for that end of October reading vlog. So this is October's Harvest by Charity Williams. So I also got this on Kindle Unlimited. When I read the description, I did not catch the fact that this was geared towards like younger teenagers. I think it actually said like ages 12 to 16. So was that middle grade? Is that considered middle grade at that point? So that might have played into some of the reasons why I didn't like this book. But anyways, this is following a isolated community, a cult with like a physical fence around it. And there are people who are considered saints and people who are considered sinners. So it's a very like classist type of society. And we are following October and her younger brother. And October is, I think she's 16. Her father goes missing and is presumed to be dead. Very conveniently, the cult leader comes around and wants to marry their mother. And the mother's like, oh yeah, sure, let's get married. Like her husband was like just like within the last weeks was gone. Okay, apparently the love of her life, you know, like the kids are talking all the time about like what a love story they have and like looking up to their relationship of what a marriage should be like. Well, apparently not, because within 3 weeks, she's shacking up with this dude. She moves her kids into his house. And meanwhile, the whole time, October like can't stand him. And she is trying to find a way to escape because she is convinced that her and her brother were not born there. That they might have actually either been adopted from the outside world, that they were stolen from the outside world. And so she comes across a key that the cult leader lost. And she's trying to figure out what door does this key open. She starts finding out secrets, and she's trying to rally like her other friends who want to leave the cult and find a way to escape with her younger brother. So sounded interesting enough, right? No, it just was poorly written. There was lots of plot holes. There were multiple scenes with like just unnecessary incest for no reason, which knowing that this book, it was meant for ages 12 to 16, just feels kind of weird. Like I don't have kids, but maybe for a 16-year-old, it's fine, but I don't really know why a 12-year-old, it just seemed weird to like market that towards a 12-year-old. Anyways, and then I just felt like the ending, it just sort of ended. And yes, a good author can write a cliffhanger like that and you close the book and you're like, oh man, I'm hungry for more. I hope there's going to be a sequel or like, you know, what actually happened? No, this just felt like she just stopped writing in the middle of a sentence. It was very, very weird. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. But it was a debut novel, so hopefully her writing and her books will just get stronger over time. Okay, so those were the worst books that I read in 2022. The fact that only 5 out of 50 books made it on this list, I think that was a really successful reading year for me, especially because I actually didn't start reading again until late August. So I read 50 books between like the second half of August and the end of the year. Pretty good. So sorry again if any of your favorite books made it to the list, especially Ghost Eaters. I've been watching some of these like worst and best videos of 2022, and I know some of my friends out there, Ghost Eaters made their best books of the year. So I'm really, really sorry, but I have to always stay honest, and these are my honest opinions. So hopefully you all didn't have too many books that you didn't like this year, and let's all hope that we can have a better reading year for 2023. Hope you guys are having a good holiday season, and Happy New Year!